Mafia The Old Country is finally here, and it nails the old-time mob movie vibes. From explosively tense action sequences to grounded emotional moments, The Old Country is a game that very much puts its storyline first. And whilst the world of Sicily is a joy to explore, most of the content is contained within the story missions. And if you want to get the most out of your playthrough, from how best to spend our money early on to finding additional tidbits of lore, then here's 8 crucial tips I've found for the absolute best experience in Mafia The Old Country. I want to give a massive thank you to 2K Games for sponsoring this video, and if you haven't done so already, then you could pick up Mafia The Old Country through my link in the description or pinned comments. But without further ado, let's dive right in to 1900 Sicily. Like I said, Mafia The Old Country is very much a game that puts its story, main missions, and characters first. It's a return to the roots of the Mafia franchise, both in the way the game is structured, and I suppose more literally in where and when it's set. The map of Sicily, where the game takes place, is this beautiful backdrop, and sets a far more rural tone than the previous entries. And despite living among thousands of years of history here, the region has become poor and hopeless for many, including the protagonist Enzo, who's endured life thus far in the hell of a sulfur mine. And to many in positions like this, a lifetime of crime that comes with a risk of an early death seems far more attractive than remaining in a lifetime of poverty, which will probably result in an early death anyway. And this desire to get more out of life is the exact kind of mentality that enabled the Mafia to rise to power in this place to begin with, whilst the mob's fixations on vendettas and honor would ensure that this life would be one of violence and bloodshed. As Enzo, you'll witness most of that violence firsthand as you prove your loyalty and work your way up through the criminal underworld. It's a very tight-knit, fast-paced storyline which jumps from action sequence to cutscene to action again, and whilst explore mode does exist, wherein we can just enjoy the open world at our own pace and hunt for collectibles, I would honestly recommend focusing fully on the storyline first. Things really start to crescendo as it progresses, and breaking that up with more menial open world exploration in between isn't really what this game is all about. Whilst there are literally hundreds of collectibles still to find after the main storyline is done, there's no need to worry about missing side quests or progressing the main storyline too quickly. The core focus of this game is its main story, so for the most part, just sit back and enjoy that journey. Exploration mode is more of a fun additional post-game experience. With that said, there are still a few things you should take the time to do during that initial playthrough, with the first being to actively seek out denarii, the game's money. There is a lot to buy in Mafia The Old Country, and a single playthrough just ain't gonna cut it. But it may just about cut buying up the more important things, stuff like weapons and charms, as well as the faster cars and horses. And the most reliable way to obtain denarii is simply by looting enemies. So if you are wanting to buy a little more as you go through the game, taking down foes and then looting them will yield more loot than simply sneaking around them. They're also just the best source of ammo, bandages, whetstones, pretty much anything Enzo is going to need aside from the notes and collectibles. So taking the time to loot as you go, or at the end of any big fight, is worth doing to obtain some initial extra wealth. There's also locked chests, which can be opened with our knife at the expense of some sharpness, which also serve as additional loot containers too. And the final method to get money is to keep an eye out for trinacria, often found on low-lying wall tops or potentially needing shooting from off the sides of walls. Again, many of these can be found during exploration later, but you can naturally come across quite a few through the main story as well, for a few extra denarii. Each one can be sold for 100 exactly after we trade them in at Pasquale's store, which we'll drive right past in several story missions, or can just fast travel to in explore mode. There's definitely a few things worth saving the denarii for to get sooner rather than later, which we'll go over, but after getting those, money becomes a little less crucial. Though if you're a total completionist like me who wants to obtain everything, then it is well worth taking the time to loot everything and everyone through the main quests. But honestly, once you've bought the weapons, horses, and cars with the highest stats, much of the remaining stuff is purely cosmetic, a stylistic choice rather than a game-changing piece of gear. The only cosmetic I'd possibly recommend dropping 1,000 denarii on sooner rather than later is this little paint thing in Pasquale's store, allowing us to customize the colors of most of our vehicles with several choices. This one definitely feels like a decent price for the sheer number of options we'll unlock, but for the most part, the best thing to buy first are knives, guns, and charm upgrades. Speaking of which, Rosary Charms offer some great passive abilities in-game, starting us off with 1 medallion slot and 1 bead slot. But for just 500 denarii at Pasquale's, we can upgrade that to 2 beads, and for a further 1,000, another 2, for a grand total of 4. Honestly, if you're gonna buy one thing first, then buy this. I mean, decent guns are good, but generally when you need them during missions, they'll be around for you to pick up, though this, on the other hand, can provide some nice passive buffs, which you can customize to your leisure. For instance, the Fortunato bead can boost our denarii that we find, enabling yet more purchases later. Phantasma is great for those who prefer the challenge of a stealthy approach, dampening our footsteps. Forteza lets us take a little more damage during duels, and Destreza increases our reload speed. There's plenty more than that though that can be found across the world, with some even buyable right here at Pasquale's, if you have the money, with most of those improving our carrying capacity of various items. And remember to check back on this charm menu from time to time for anything potentially better that you may have picked up, and do keep an eye out for new charms out in the world. Unlike some collectibles, they don't leave a marker when you get near them, but provided you have all 4 bead slots unlocked, you can afford to experiment a little more with the different ones. The other item you'll want to prioritize more early on is getting a good knife. This is less easy to swap out than a gun. You'll normally keep the same one throughout an entire quest, and there are 3 main types to choose from. Sanituri, which can also be thrown, meaning you don't have to get right up close for a stealth takedown, but will need to retrieve your blade. Razaloo, which we can use to perform takedowns during combat, and Stiletto, which are known to have higher durability. And the choice here, I think, is between stylism and practicality. Sanituri and Razaloo both have very fun abilities that we can use, but going back to that thing of looting every chest you find, that'll be easiest by buying up the highest durability Stiletto on the market. Every lock that we pick reduces the blade's sharpness by 1, as does every stealth takedown, for which you'll then need a whetstone to sharpen the blade back to full health. These can be found or looted from enemies, but are by no means an abundant resource. That said, if you're finding blade durability not to be a problem at all, then the other 2 are both very fun as well, and definitely worth checking out. Again, there's a dedicated blade shop at Pasquale's, but also many elsewhere across the game. The early 1900s, especially in Sicily, was a very different time. Horses were still a common means of travel, motorcars were just getting adopted by the wealthier end of society, but were a cutting-edge technology, and when you bear in mind that historical context, having a minimap to navigate to would have felt out of place, in this world where starting the car requires cranking a handle at the front. Fortunately, Mafia The Old Country fixes navigation with something less out of place. This was turned on by default for me, but can be toggled on and off in gameplay settings. It's called navigation signage, and it'll spawn helpful, non-solid flags in place where roads fork, telling us the right direction to our destination. The hilly landscapes of Sicily don't really allow you to make a beeline for the quest marker, and the roads themselves can be very windy, so you definitely do well to follow these navigation signs. There's also the option during missions, if you'd prefer not to drive at all, to simply skip the ride. Though personally, if you haven't completed a full playthrough yet, I would definitely recommend not doing that. Car rides, especially when we have passengers, are generally filled with character dialogue, and skipping them is going to mean skipping a fair chunk of story exposition. Though I did find it a very useful feature when I went back to find chapter-specific collectibles I'd missed. But otherwise I'd say skipping a ride is kind of like skipping a cutscene. Cars and horses are also going to be your best friend for getting around in explore mode. There are several fast travel icons for hopping around key areas, but the spaces in between are definitely best driven or ridden to. Driving is definitely the faster of the 2, but horses offer a little more maneuverability, especially when exploring wilder areas. And make sure not to run off too far without your car or horse. You can just jump back to a fast travel point, but that may then mean teleporting you far away from the place you were trying to explore. Another cool choice that you have with cars is whether to run with manual or automatic gear shift. Automatic is of course hands down more straightforward. I drive manual in real life, I find it very easy, just sensing when the car needs a gear change, but you can't really get that same sense in the game. At least you can't on a mouse and keyboard. To be fair though, these cars don't have that many gears, so it's not too complicated to keep on top of, and does add that extra layer of realism in driving these awesome sounding, very classic cars. This is again something that can be altered in gameplay settings, along with turning off simulation driving, if you want an even more hardcore driving experience. And you can also adjust camera distance from the car, as well as things like whether you want the camera to follow your angle as you move, or whether you want to adjust that manually. If you're also struggling with the QuickTime struggle events, where you're required to spam a certain button, then there is a way around that as well. Just go to accessibility and toggle on simplified struggle. There was one of these later on where for some reason I just couldn't win it in time with mouse and keyboard. I did in the end manage it by switching to controller, funnily enough, but this would have also been a viable option. Whilst the story of Mafia The Old Country is fairly linear, it's more like a movie. We don't get a ton of choice over the outcomes of the narrative. Where we do really get to choose is in our approach to combat a lot of the time, with the main question of course being whether to go stealthy or guns blazing. Now sometimes you will be forced to adhere to one of these options. Earlier on when Enzo is weaker, stealth is understandably more compulsory, and other missions do later on start with a fight already having broken out. But there's still plenty of times where the choice is ours, and for each kind of combat, there are items designed specifically for that style of play. Whilst denarii are the game currency, regular coins can also be collected and used specifically as enemy distractions. Quiet ones that'll usually serve to lure one enemy away thinking it's their lucky day, only to most likely be immediately strangled to death. If you're wanting to lure away a group, you can instead pick up a wine bottle to make a far louder splashing sound. Just don't, whatever you do, throw it directly at enemies. It'll absolutely tip them off and pure stealth will be over. If stealth is over though, then some of the time when you find them around, you have the alternative option of lanterns, which when thrown will always explode and envelop nearby enemies in flames of instant death. Alternatively, you can swap between equipping a coin to equipping a grenade for much the same effect minus the flames, though grenades can be more easily carried around. In terms of guns, your small arm can consist of a pistol or a sawn-off shorter shotgun, with a pistol being great at mid-range and shotgun of course up close. Or for more long-range weaponry, you can take a rifle, which is perfect for sniping far away from safely behind cover. Speaking of which, combat is tough and unforgiving. You will die out in the open very quickly if you stay there, so take it cautiously, but have fun with the explosive arsenal of weapons. Finally, when all is said and done and the main story completed, we're left with this beautiful map of Sicily to explore, and finding collectibles providing a good reason to do so. If you have completed the game at this point, then you'll no doubt have some of these marked on your map when you zoom in, and I'm willing to bet that on the journey to go and collect those, you'll come across many more. Make sure to check out any building, especially interesting looking ones, and keep checking the map very often. For half of the collectibles, even if you don't see them, they will become marked on the map simply for being near them, with newspapers containing interesting pieces of lore from the time period, and again Trinacria being among the most common too. Though you've also got saint cards, which can be found at various shrines, as well as specific spots to take photographs for more lore on specific pieces of scenery. Those ones are all easier to find, given they do show up on the map, with the harder ones being charms, so keep an eye out for those during story missions. And finally, mystery foxes. There's 50 of those to collect in total, and they're generally hidden in the most obscure places both out in the world and during specific missions. Also, looking at the map, some items will be marked only collectible during a certain mission, so you'll know if you need to replay something for it. But overall, there's hundreds of additional collectibles to find, so if you are going for 100% completion, then you'll also get to appreciate the details of this map a lot more. Honestly, mountainous European vineyard type places have got to be one of my favorite video game settings, so this this was a great reason to dive back in post-game and explore the map some more. Anyway, let me know down below what you've been enjoying the most in Mafia The Old Country. For me, it was the storyline. This very much reminded me of the more story-driven games I grew up on, albeit with significantly updated graphics. Thank you very much again to 2K Games for sponsoring this video, and specifically to Hangar13 for making this beautiful game in the first place. Massive shout out to the patrons for going the extra mile to support the channel. Cheers for watching, I'm Sam Bram, and I think I'm gonna go look at Airbnbs in Sicily now. It looks like a nice place to visit. See you in the next one.